Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to Enhanced Push Notifications and Live Tiles for Windows Phone. My name is Peter Torr. I'm a Program Manager on the Windows Phone Application Platform team. Now, ordinarily, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Fennell would be giving this talk, but he couldn't make it, so I'm the understudy. So I will try and do my best and try and do him justice, but he would be the master if he was up here. So imagine Thomas was up here. And if you really want to see him doing it, then you can watch the Mix videos online where he gave this talk at Mix. So before we start, quick mention that this session, like all of the WPH Windows Phone sessions, has the chance for you to win a Windows Phone. So two things to keep in mind for this. Number one is pay attention to the talk, because at the end of the talk there'll be a question, and if you are the first person to answer it correctly, you win a phone. So first thing is pay attention. And the second thing is stay till the end. And if you do both of those things in every single WPH Windows Phone session, then you have a chance to win a phone at each one of those. So with that, let's start with the content of the talk. So I'm going to start the talk by talking about two different applications on Windows Phone and the difference between them. And these are both traffic applications. Now on the left, you'll see an application that had things like travel times on different freeways in Seattle. It had traffic cameras for different freeways on Seattle, and it showed you the traffic, green, red, yellow, black traffic. And on the surface, these applications are pretty much the same. They have the same set of features, but the one on the left is free and hasn't had that many users, and the one on the right is not free and it has a lot more users. And you might say, well, why? They both have traffic cameras, they both have maps, they both have travel times, and they both have relatively good user experiences in the application. But what makes one more popular than the other? And the answer is that the one on the right had a live tile, and it used updates to that live tile to give you glance and go information. And that's the topic of this talk today, is using the live tiles, using live push, using toasts, to get more information to your users in a timely fashion, to be more interactive, to be more engaging, and to ultimately make your application more popular and more relevant to the user, so they buy yours versus someone else's. So today in this talk, we will look at some general information about push and tiles, so things that aren't new in Mango, which is the code name of the next version of Windows Phone, but things that are good groundwork to talk about the Mango features, especially if you're not familiar with the Windows Phone 7 way of doing push updates. And then we will talk about new features, so some new APIs, some demos of those APIs, and looking at some features around performance, reliability, and so on. So a bit of background, and then all the cool new stuff. So setting the context for push notifications and live tiles, they're really one of the key things that stick out about Windows Phone versus some of the competition. And you'll see this time and again in reviews when they talk about Windows Phone. They'll talk about our start menu and our iconic experience as being one of the things that differentiates Windows Phone from other phones. And we're not the only phone to have push notifications. Other phones let you push data to the phone. You can update little badges, or you can send notifications to the user. But no other phone has what we call live tiles. And live tiles, just like that traffic map, are things that come alive in the Windows Phone start menu and really make the phone more engaging and more fun for the user. And so it's this combination of push notifications, of sending data to the phone, and the ability to update your tile and have it be live with animation and new data that really makes Windows Phone unique and really lets your applications stand out from the crowd. So still in this background section of the talk, the history about push and toast and tiles, the kind of things that you can do with notifications there are three things you can do. The first is you can send a toast to a device. And a toast is the little blue thing that pops up, you see here in the image. Same as if you get an SMS message, you get a little toast for the SMS message. Your third-party applications can have toasts popping up as well when a server sends some data to the phone. Another thing you can do with push is you can send tile notifications. And so in the image as well, you see a tile here that says news headlines. And using push, your servers can send new images to that tile or new data to that tile and make it really come alive. And we'll talk about the properties that you can set on the tile and the features that you have there in a second. And then lastly, there are these things called raw notifications. And we won't spend much time on them today, but raw notifications are ways that your server can send data directly into your application without your application having to poll for it. So if you know how things like push email work on Exchange ActiveSync, as soon as a mail arrives at the server, it comes and it's delivered into your inbox. You can do the same kinds of things with your Windows Phone applications without you having to constantly poll the server or have these long-running HTTP requests that kind of time out on the server and wait for something to happen. You can use these things called raw notifications to push data directly into your application. But like I said, that's not really the focus of today. Today's focus is on toasts and tiles and the cool UI stuff, but it is another feature you can use with push notifications. So let's take a little bit of time to talk about the architecture for push notifications and who are the actors and how they interact and what it means for your application. So on the screen here, you'll see there's three big boxes. On the left, we have Windows Phone 7 running your push-enabled application in red, and our push client service in gray. That's code that Microsoft writes that runs on the phone. Then on the right of the diagram, we have a cloud service, and that's your cloud service. Your cloud service. So the services that you write, they may already exist in the cloud. There may be new ones that you're writing. And at the bottom, we have MPNS, which is the Microsoft Push Notification Server. And that's something that we write. Microsoft has that server, and so that's our part of the puzzle. So you own the cloud service and the push-enabled app. We own the push client and the MPNS. So let's see how these things work together to get push notifications on the phone. So the first thing that happens is when your application runs for the first time or periodically, you ask the push client service for a URI, right? A URI being, http:// ... a long series of characters that you don't really care much about. But you ask it for a URI which uniquely identifies your device. And if you've previously asked for URI, you can ask the system to return that for you. So you can find in a previous URI you've asked for. Now, assuming that you're asking for a new one, the push client service, our code, talks to our server to find out what that unique URI for you should be. Now, later on in one of the demos, you'll see what a push URI looks like, but it really is a long sequence of characters that you really don't care much about. The thing is, it's unique, and it uniquely identifies this particular device. So the MPNS sends the URI back to the push client service, and the push client service gives the URI back to your app. And the URI to your app is pretty useless. Like I said, it's this long sequence of characters. You can't really do anything with it. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a unique sequence of characters. But what you do is you want to send it off to your cloud service, because that is how your cloud service can end up talking to your application down the road. And so when you send your URI to the cloud service, we also recommend that you do some kind of binding with that URI that you know about. For example, the user ID of the person using that application, so that in the back end you can correlate this user ID with this URI. So then when something happens on the back end for that user, you find out what their ID is, and then you go send them a push notification. It also helps you correlate URIs with users or devices in the rare case that a new URI is given for your application. You can look at the old URI, get rid of it, request a new one. So now the push-enabled app, your app, has sent the URI to your cloud service. Again, it's just this opaque sequence of characters. You don't really care what it is. And your cloud service stores it. And it waits for something interesting to happen. So something that would require sending a toast to the device or updating a tile on the device. And then it sends the update that it wants to send to the phone to our notification service using the URI that has been given from the client. So the URI you get points to our Microsoft Phone push notification service. And the payload that you send is a simple XML payload. We will see it in the demos a bit later on. But it's a very simple XML payload, uses very common web technologies, uses HTTP messages with a post. Nothing proprietary, no secret source. It's all very open. You'll notice in this diagram that you didn't pay Microsoft any money, you didn't do any secret handshakes with Microsoft, there's no certificate exchanges, you don't need any of those things to start using push notifications on Windows Phone. All you need is an app and a cloud service, and then you can start sending data to your phone through push notifications. So the push goes to the Microsoft Phone Notification Service. The Microsoft Phone Notification Service locates your device based on that URI. It knows how to find you, and then delivers the data to the device, whether that's a toast or a tile update or a raw notification in your application. And that's the final step of the puzzle. And then the user sees the toast, or they see the tile, or the application receives the raw notification and does some processing with it. So that's the high-level architecture of how push notifications work. So on the slide here, it's going to animate some of the scenarios that we've seen for push notifications and some of the popular applications. So on the top left, you see weather, and there's several weather applications in the marketplace that use this, and they do things like obviously tell you what the weather is like in your chosen location. So typically you pick the location where you live, and you pin the tile to start, and then periodically that tile will update with today's weather. So you don't have to open up your phone, find the icon, click the icon, wait for the app to load, wait for it to download data, and then find out it's sunny or it's raining or whatever. You just unlock your phone and it's right there on the start menu. So very, very cool feature of Windows Phone. Like I mentioned at the start, these live tiles are really one of the key things that differentiate Windows Phone from these other devices. Weather applications also use toasts to send you warnings. For example, there's been a lot of stories recently about bad weather. If bad weather is heading towards where you've told the application that you live, it can send you a toast to say, warning, there's a flood warning scheduled for your area, or there's a storm warning coming. And so you can get a toast, just like your airline sends you an SMS when you're about to, when your flight's boarding. Your weather application can send a toast to the device saying it's going to start pouring down with rain. You might want to, prepare for that. So weather apps do those kind of things. Send to WP7 is an application that lets you start reading content on your PC, laptop or PC, in a web browser. And then if you get interrupted or you don't have time to finish what you're reading, there's a plugin you can use in your browser that actually sends those URLs to your phone. And then it will update your toast, and it can update your tile, and it can also send you a toast so that later on, when you're home in the evening or you're taking the bus home or whatever, you can finish off reading those URLs that you were reading earlier. So that's a cool use of push there. The next two, which are Chess by Post and AlphaJax, are two turn-by-turn applications that use various features all three features of push notification, actually. So one thing they do is the tile will tell you when it's your turn. So let's say you're running AlphaJax, which is it's a word game, kind of like a Scrabble game. You make a move, you put the app away. Then the person you're playing with later on makes a move, they put their phone away, but you'll get a push notification to your device, which will update your tile, and you'll see here that it says your turn on the tile. So that tells you when you unlock your phone again, you don't need to go into the app to know if you should make a turn or not. You can just, so you don't need to go into the app to know if you should make a turn or not. You just unlock your phone, and if it says your turn, you go into it. If it doesn't say your turn, you know you're still waiting for the previous person to make their turn. They can also send you toasts. If someone makes a turn and you're currently using your phone, you'll get a toast to say, oh, it's your turn. So you can quickly make a turn so that the game goes quickly back and forth. And also, these games can use the raw notification that I mentioned earlier, so that while you're in the app looking at the game board and someone else makes a turn, it can immediately react to that turn and then tell you it's your turn. So they don't have to do polling on the server. They don't have to do long-running HTTP web requests. They can just wait for an incoming push from the server to say, hey, now it's your turn. So it's very, very good for things like turn-by-turn games. Bees is a Twitter application. So it uses updates to the tile to show you how many unread tweets are in whatever area you're following. And you'll see that they're using a tile that is actually composed on the server. So they take the image of the little bird's head, and they take the number 16 and they compose that. So it looks just like your Outlook unread count or your SMS unread count. So they're actually updating an image on the server and pushing it to the phone to say, hey, in this case, there's 16 unread items. And they can also send you toasts if someone direct messages you. You get a toast just as if it was an SMS. And then lastly, we talked at the start about the Seattle traffic map using live tiles to show you what the traffic is like in your region, updating periodically. So these are just some of the kinds of things you can do with push notifications, with tiles and toasts, even today in Windows Phone 7. And of course, we're improving that in Mango. The key thing, though, is that there are already hundreds and hundreds of these applications. They do tend to be rated higher and do better than similar applications that do not have push integrated, so that don't use toasts and don't use tiles. So really just kind of a plug to say, if it makes sense for your app, you really should consider using these features because it will make you stand out from others. So that's kind of the setting the history and giving you a bit of background on the architecture of what toasts and tiles are and how they work. Now, after we shipped Windows Phone 7, we heard a bunch of feedback from people. And of course, we love hearing feedback from people because it helps us get better so that we can provide better products and services to you. And these are some of the things that we heard from developers. They said they wanted more control of the tile. Right? They see the first-party application tiles have more features than third-party application tiles. They said, give me richer notifications and interaction. Again, first parties tend to be a bit richer than third parties. They wanted more reliable notifications. We've had some issues in Windows Phone 7, particularly before the Nodo update, around tiles not updating or notifications not getting to devices. They've asked for more endpoints because there is a limit to how many applications you can have installed on the phone that are using push notifications. And they've asked for more samples because in that diagram there was that cloud service up in the corner that you have to write. And we believe it's pretty simple to write the cloud service, but we needed to give more guidance and more samples. So these are the things that people told us, and I'm going to walk you through kind of how we've taken that feedback and what we've done in Mango to improve it, and we'll look at how we did at the end. So now let's look at some of the new features that we have for APIs for push notifications and live tiles on Windows Phone. So the first thing we're doing is we're adding a local tile API. So in Windows Phone 7, the only way that you could update a tile was to send a push to the phone. There was no way for the app running to update the tile itself. So you had to have that cloud service that was running to send push notifications to update your tile. And in Windows Phone Mango, we're adding an API so you can do that locally. And also, if you were at my previous talk or if you've heard elsewhere around background agents, which is our feature for running code in the background in Windows Phone Mango, you'll also be able to use this local tile API to update your tile in the background from your code. So you don't necessarily need a push service anymore just to update your tile. So this gives you full control of the properties on your tile, whether it's in the foreground or the background, and it doesn't require a push service. So this part of the talk is not about the push notification service, but it is about the live tiles. And this lets you do things like build a calorie counter or a sticky note app where you don't really need a cloud component to it. For a calorie counter, for example, you have the app installed, you eat a cheeseburger and you put in 1,000 calories, and you want the tile to update and say, you've eaten 1,000 calories today. And then you eat another cheeseburger and it says, well, that's another 1,000 calories, and then it turns red and says, you should stop eating today. So there are a bunch of things you can do in apps on the phone that don't really need a push service in order to make tiles really come to life. So you can do that now with the local tile API. We're also letting you have multiple tiles. So this is another thing that the first-party applications could do in Windows Phone 7. For example, you could pin multiple artists from Zune, you could pin multiple web pages from IE, you could pin multiple contacts from people, etc. But for a third-party application, you only ever had your one application tile. But in Windows Phone Mango, we're letting you add more than one tile. So you still have your default tile, which launches the app, but you can also have what we call secondary tiles that let you launch directly into a deep link into your application. So in this example, and this is part of the demo we'll see later, we have 3 tiles. We have the application tile, which is the default tile that comes with your app that launches into the main experience. Then we have two secondary tiles, one for world news, which launches directly into the world news section of my app, and one for local news, which launches into the local section of my app. So just like you can pin people to the start menu and go directly to that person, you can pin any arbitrary content from your app onto the start menu and then link directly into that experience. Another thing we're adding, making it much cooler to have tiles, live tiles on Windows Phone Mango, is what we call back-of-tile updates. So in Windows Phone 7, you had the front of the tile. You had an image, you had a title, and you had an optional count. But what we're doing in Windows Phone Mango is also adding the back of the tile support. So you can have the front of your tile with an image and some content, and then the tile can flip over in this cool kind of perspective 3D animation and show you more information on the back. And the start menu takes care of the animation. It makes care of making sure that it looks nice and it doesn't look like your phone is going crazy. It does a nice job of making sure the animations look smooth, making sure they happen at the right time. But you get to decide what content is on the front and what content is on the back. And we'll see that in the demo as well. So now let's look at the demo. So I'm going to start off with the device, and then we will look at some code. So is this viewable for everybody? I apologize for the light. So you'll see here we have my news headlines, my demo news application. And this is all mocked up content, so it's not real news. It's just static data that's on the phone. And you'll see here's the normal start experience, the first experience of my app. So I have some categories of news. I have world news, I have local news, I have political news, I have business news, etc. And you'll notice that there's these pin icons here. And these will let me pin this tile directly to the start menu. So for example, if I find myself going into world news a lot, let's click on world news. Say I always look at the world news, and I decide that rather than launching the app and then clicking world news is too much hassle, I only want one click. What I can do is I'll go back to here, and I'll click this pin icon, and now you'll see there's a second tile on the start screen that says world news. So world news is now pinned directly to the start menu, and if I click on this, I go into world news. I don't have to go to the home page first and then drill in to see where I want to. So just like people, just like Zune, just like the browser, you can do this now in your applications. And I can, if I run the app again, you'll see that the pin is now has a cross through it to say that you've already pinned this to the start menu. You can unpin it. So let's unpin world news, and let's pin local news. So now you see that world news is gone, and local news is there instead. And if I tap and hold to get rid of local news, then run the app again, we'll see that it's smart enough to know that both of them are now gone. So we give you the APIs to pin things to the start menu, to unpin things from the start menu, and to know whether or not they're pinned so that you can show your user experience. And you'll notice that when I tap to pin, we navigate directly to the start menu. This is consistent with how the first-party applications work. It gives the user some context to say, okay, this is where the tile went, because if you have a long start menu, it scrolls to the bottom and it puts the tile there. It also helps stop abuse, because my application can't run and then immediately put 15 start tiles on the start menu, because as soon as it adds one, we navigate away from the application and it's not running anymore. So this actually is a mechanism to stop abuse of spamming your start menu with random tiles. So that's looking at some multi-tile support. Now let's look at going into World News Today. You'll see also there's this little T icon here with a cross through it. And this is a poor example of program manager artwork that is supposed to indicate toast updates. So we've talked about tiles. We can also have toast updates. So and what we have here is a cross through it saying that there isn't a toast. Oops. Sorry, this is sensitive. So here we say, if I click on it, it says sign up for toasts. So because toasts can come in while you're using the phone doing other things, they can come in, they're relatively unobtrusive, but they can get in your way. We have an ingestion requirement that says when you want to use a toast, you need to ask the user's permission. So I'm asking for the user's permission to enable toasts. So I'm going to say OK. And now I'll be able to send toasts to this device with data. And for that, I'm going to go back to the laptop in a second. So now we've seen pinned items to the start menu. We have seen multiple pinned items to the start menu, and we've seen linking from items on the start menu directly into the context of your application. Now let's look at some of the cool things about the code to see how easy it is to do this. And I'll show you the backup tile support and the APIs for doing the push in the second half of the demo. This is all just about the local tile APIs. So let's spend a bit of time walking through what the code does for this multi-tile support. If I look at my main page, I set up a push channel, which we'll use in the second part of the demo to send push notifications to the device. But what we're interested in is the code here. So when I navigate to my start page, remember those pins that were pinned or unpinned, depending on whether the icon was on the start menu or not? What I want to do is update that image whenever my page gets navigated to, so I can show the correct UI to the user. So if I just hit F12 to look at this method, it's just a helper method I wrote. This is using the new local shell API. It checks, of my active tiles, can I find one with a specific name, a specific URI that it's going to. So I look for world news, and I will look for local news. If I can find a tile with that name, so if it's not null, it means that it must be on the start menu. Like I found it, must be on the start menu. Therefore, I'm going to switch the image source to just be the remove icon, which is the unpin. Otherwise, if I couldn't find the tile, it means it wasn't on the start menu. Therefore, I will show the pin image. Right. So this is how easy it is to say, should I show a pin or should I not show a pin? You'll see People does this on the phone. If you pin a contact to the start menu, it ungrays the pin button, for example. Then let's look at what happens if I actually click on one of those things. So if I click on the pin world news icon, for example, I'm going to use this other method, helper method, called toggle pin tile. And this is going to do the work to either pin the tile to start and set some properties, or remove it from the start menu. So again, first thing I do, is I look for that tile in the list of active tiles. If the tile was null, if we didn't find the tile, it means it's not there, which means we want to add it. So I create this new thing called standard tile data, which is the standard data you can put on a tile, so the image, the text, the count, etc. I'll set it to be the specified background image. So for world news, it's an icon that says world news. For local news, it's an icon that says local news. I'll set its count to be 1, because presumably there's some news there that you want to read, and then push will update that later. I set the title to be the title, in this case world news or local news. And then I call shell-tile.create. And this is the thing that puts the tile in the start menu and navigates the user to the start menu so they can see where the tile went. And when I create the tile, I give it a URI telling it which page to launch. That's how the deep linking works. I can add a parameter if I want. So in this case, I'm adding pinned equals true. I don't use this parameter in this demo, but you can use that so that when your app launches, you can know that it came from a deep link on the start menu versus a link inside your app, if that makes sense to you. And I pass in the initial data, which is the background image and the count and the title that we specified. So that's the code it takes to add a new tile to the start menu. And then deleting is much easier. Usually it is. It's usually easier to destroy than create. If the tile was already on the start menu, I just need to go ahead and delete it. And then, of course, I'll update the pin image to be either the pin or the not pin, depending on whether the tile was deleted or not. So that's adding a tile, deleting a tile, and checking if a tile is on start menu. We can also look at the code for the toast, which is in world news. So world news, when it starts, I look for my push channel. Again, we'll talk about the push channel in the second demo. Then I call reset tile on the world news. Let's look at this one. And what this is doing is this is performing an operation that we recommend people do. It's what Outlook does and what SMS does on the phone, which is the tile on Outlook on the phone doesn't show you the unread count of messages. It shows you the unseen count. So if you have a Windows phone and you have it hooked up to a mail provider, you'll notice that it might say you have 10 messages. Now you might have 100 unread messages, but 10 just means there's 10 new ones since last you looked. And if you tap on that tile and you launch the Mail app, and then you immediately go back to the Start menu, it's back to 0 unseen messages. So there's this common pattern that when you click on a tile, you should kind of zero out the numbers on the tile. Not always appropriate. It really depends on the type of application you're building. But in this application, because the things I want to show on the tile are the number of unseen articles, when I launch back into World News, I want to reset the number of unseen articles. So I'm going to do the same trick. I'm going to find my tile based on the page that I'm on, bail out if it doesn't exist. I'm going to use that standard tile data class again, which is the data that I can add to the tile. I'm going to add a title, reset it to the default. I'm going to reset my image and my count back to 0, and I'm going to clear out the back of tile. Now the back of tile is something we will set in push in the second part of the demo, but imagine the tile was flipping over because there was news reports. Once I've seen those news reports, it's going to stop flipping. And then I simply call update with that updated data. So that's how I can update my tile to say, no more unseen news articles, go back to your normal state. And then update toast image, I won't go into details here. That's very much the same as the unpin, the toggle pin image. It checks if the toast is available, show the cross. If the toast isn't available, don't show the cross. And then when I click on the toggle toast, this is going to do a check and say, because it's the toggle, it's going to check if my push channel is currently bound to a shell toast, right? So it can be bound or not. If it's currently bound to if it's not currently bound to a shell toast, I'm going to ask the user, because again we have this ingestion requirement that says you should ask the user to opt into these things. And assuming the user says yes, we're just going to call bind to shell toast on our push channel. And that's all it takes to say that when something comes in from that Microsoft push notification server and it's of a specific type, show the toast to the user. So that's how you get the toasts appearing on your screen. Otherwise, we will if it wasn't bound already, so if it was bound already, we will unbind it. And then we'll update the image again so it shows crossed out or not crossed out. So that's the code that we have for hooking and unhooking toasts for creating and updating and deleting tiles. Now let's look at the next part of the session, which is core push updates. And then the second part of the demo will show you actually pushing data to the phone, getting tiles updated, showing animation. So the cool stuff of that is still coming. So I mentioned one of the things people complained about was the reliability of push notifications on Windows Phone 7. And there were a bunch of reasons for that. What we found was, as we delivered Windows Phone throughout the world in various operators, is that different operators have different rules about how long a phone can keep a connection open. And if the connection is open too long, or there's no traffic for a while, the operators will shut down that cellular connection. And if we're relying on that connection in order to send a push to your device, it means that pushes don't happen because the network has shut down the connection. And when that happened, we would detect that in Windows Phone 7, but we could wait up to an hour before we really noticed that things had gone wrong and started polling the server. And we'd poll it every hour. And that meant that the time between updates could be quite long, right? Up to an hour between updates if we're in this polling mode. And so it meant that push wasn't as reliable as we wanted it to be. So what we've done in Windows Phone Mango is we've rewritten TDET, which is a timeout detection, so that we know we're better aware of which networks are doing which things with connections. So some time out very quickly, some time out a bit longer. So we're smarter about detecting when these things have timed out. And if they do time out and we have to start polling the server more frequently, we've actually lowered that interval for these connections that are not persistent. So it's gone from an hour in Windows Phone 7 down to 15 minutes in Windows Phone Mango. So the maximum you'll need to wait for a push notification, if the network is not friendly to our persistent connections, is 15 minutes, which is still 15 minutes, but it's much better than the hour that it was in Windows Phone 7. So we've done some work on reliability. We've also done some work on the efficiency. So one thing that we do is we use a feature of TLS which lets us resume sessions within 8 hours. So if we've talked to the push notification server recently, we can begin talking to it again really quickly and not waste time doing a bunch of handshakes for the security. We can reuse sessions that we've had recently. We also have some improved hints for radio dormancy. So the radio is one of the most expensive pieces of the phone in terms of battery usage. And so we don't want the phone to be up and down all the time or to be up for a long time. We want the phone to come up as infrequently as possible and then to go down as fast as possible. And so we've done some work there to make sure that we utilize the radio more efficiently, which means we use less battery. And then we're also doing things like when there's multiple tile images to download, so the back or the front of the tile, we need to download multiple things. We'll actually download them all at once versus downloading them one at a time, which again helps keep the radio up shorter, which helps with battery. So we've done some things with efficiency. And then also in performance, we've just done some general code cleanup. We've improved the state machine of our push notification client so that it actually performs faster. And what all this means is that we've increased the push limit. So I mentioned at the start that some developers had complained that the limit was too low. But in reality, we actually found that most people don't ever hit that limit. The number of apps people typically install versus the number of apps that typically have push and people that enable it meant that the average user never really hit our limit, but some power users did, and developers were concerned about that. So we've actually upped our limit to 30 push-enabled applications on the phone at a time. So that's good news for anyone that was worried about the low number before. So push notifications get to take advantage of all the features that I showed you with the local tile API. So just as with multiple tiles and with the back of tile and so on that you can do in that local API I showed you in the first demo, you can do all of that through push as well. So you'll see in the XML here, which is the kind of XML that you send from your cloud service to the Microsoft push notification service, the bits highlighted in yellow are the new bits. So with the ID at the top, you can target individual tiles, your main tile or a secondary tile. And the 3 bits at the bottom are how you can access the back of the tile, the bit that flips over and shows you more information. So you can use these new features with push notifications. And there's no API change on the client for this. So today, on the client, your foreground app calls bind to shell tile. And when you do that now in Mango, that binds to all of your tiles. And it's up to the service to send the right ID in this top part of the XML. And if you don't send an ID, we use the default tile. If you send an ID, we'll send it to a secondary tile. We can also support what's called deep links inside toasts. So another common complaint about toasts in Windows Phone 7 was that you could send a toast to a device, and the user could click the toast, and it would launch your application, but you had no context. There was no parameters passed to the application to know that it was launched from a toast. What we're doing in Windows Phone Mango, both in the local API and in the push API, is adding the ability for you to provide parameters in that toast. So when the user clicks on it, you can give context to your application. You can give the page to navigate to, just like we did with our multiple tiles, and you can provide parameters. So again, no API changes. You still use the bind to shell toast. And you'll see in yellow the new parameter that you send from your cloud service to the push notification service. You send this new parameter, we send it to the app, and the app can do what it wants with it. So this really lets you have, again, that experience of a toast comes in, you click on it, and you're directly in the context of that toast. You don't have to go to the main page and then have the user manually navigate around. So let's look at the second part of the demo now, which is using all these features with push and using it on a hosted Windows Azure service. So first of all, I'm going to just head over here. And this is the Windows Azure kind of management console. The sample that I have here is running up in Azure, and it's a very simple sample. I mentioned before that one of the pieces of feedback we heard was that we didn't have enough samples or enough guidance on how to do this. But we've recently published some samples on how to build Azure-based services. And the Azure team released a toolkit. If you were at the keynote, you saw there's a new toolkit the Azure team released that actually does a bunch of push notification stuff for you. So in terms of getting more guidance out there, getting more samples out there, we are getting those things out to you so that you can build these push-enabled cloud services. But this is the kind of the console for my service running in Azure. I'm not going to do anything here, just to show you that if we look here, it really is windows.azure.com. This isn't fake. And if I go to my application, it's called hellopush.cloudapp.net, which is a URI that you get from Windows Azure. So this is live code running up on Microsoft's cloud. It could be running in your private cloud as well, but for this demo, it's running up in the cloud. And it's a very basic console. What it's going to let me do is send a tile update or a toast notification to my device, and then we can see how that behaves. And for this one, actually, I think I will use the emulator, because rather than switch between the camera and then the phone and then the camera, and then the laptop, I'm going to do this demo on the laptop so you can see both things side by side and not have to worry about all the context switching. So let's go ahead and run the application again, and then we'll start sending it some data from our push service, and we'll see how that makes the app behave and how it makes the tiles work and the toasts work. So let's go ahead and run this, and it will launch in the emulator. I'll put these two side by side. And my app is run. And of course, I can do all these cool things. Because this is the emulator, let me pin these two things to start. Let me pin world news, and let me pin local news as well. So now I have news, world news, and local news all pinned to the start menu. And so now, and also I'll sign up for toasts as well, so I can get toasts to this device. So I'll go to world news, I'll click on toasts, I'll say yes, I want toasts. So now everything is set up for this application on the emulator to receive toast updates and tile updates. So let's quit the app. So now here we are on the home page. We have our main tile, we have our world news pin tile, and we have our local news pin tile. And what I need to do is, remember in that architecture diagram I said that your app would talk to the push client, which would send a message to the service that would return a URI, and then you would return that URI to your service, and that's how you contacted your device. Well, in this particular case, because I'm logging into a web portal, I'm going to pretend to be the bit of code that's running in your cloud service. What I did was I run the application, and if networking is working, unfortunately networking went down in my last demo. Let's just see if it's still there. Okay. We should see a channel URI, but we're not. Let me uninstall the app and start again. Oops. Just going to uninstall the application. It doesn't have a channel URI. Let's try again. What we're looking for is a message here that will tell me what its URI is. And I'm hoping it will give us a URI very soon. Unfortunately, I'll try this one more time. It's looking like the network is not behaving well today. Let's try this one more time. Unfortunately, I cannot access the push notification service, which makes this demo not very fun. Let me shut down the emulator. I'll try one more time, and then I'll give up on this demo. I apologize for the network being flaky. I might even try and Just try this once more, and then we'll give up. So we'll launch it, wait for it to run, and see if it pops up here. Oh, good. So now it's got a channel URI. I just had to reboot the emulator. So let me pin these things again. There's world news. There's local news. And actually, let's pin the application itself. Let's go here, sample app, pin it. The joys of doing live demos with network. Okay, so I have local news, has a count of 1, because I haven't gone into it yet. I have world news, a count of 1, and I have news headlines. And the important thing is that I have this URI here. And as I mentioned, typically you would take that URI, you would send it to your service, you would store it, and when something interesting happened, you would use that to talk to your device. Let's go ahead and go to my Azure service. I'll type in this endpoint URI. So remember I said it's a bunch of random characters? Look, there they are. So that bunch of random characters uniquely identifies, in this case, my emulator instance, but in reality, your phone. And what I want to do is, for this first one, let's just send a toast to the device. So title of the toast, let's say breaking news. The content is going to be, I don't know, aliens invade. That's probably breaking news. And then launch parameters is where I can specify the page that I want to go into. So if I have no launch parameters, which I'll do now, we'll launch into the default experience on the phone. Then I'll do another one where we can deep link into the app. So I click Send Toast. Watch carefully on the emulator on the right side of the screen. You should see a blue toast pop up. Except I forgot to, when I rebooted, I forgot to ask for toasts. So remember I didn't ask for toasts, so they didn't go to the user, so the user doesn't get spammed by toasts unless they ask for them. So let me ask for the toasts. Let's quit the app again, and let's try that again. We'll send the same thing. See here it says breaking news, aliens invade. That sounds pretty breaking news to me. Let's click it. And here we are in the main page of my application. But now let's say that we want to link directly to an article. So let's say breaking news, aliens invade. And in this case, I believe where I want to go is details page .xaml, which would show me in the emulator, here's a sample details page. I want to link directly into that. And I'm going to give it an ID, which is the ID of the story. Now, I don't have any mocked up content for this, but I'm going to use 42 as everyone's favorite number. And now if we look on the emulator, we should see a toast appear any minute, if the network is still around. Let's try it one more time. Nope. One more time. Okay, so let's try that again. Oh, it's missing the slash. So now it says aliens invade. If I click on this, it's now giving me going directly into that details page. Now, of course, everyone knows 42 is the ultimate answer. So now I'm directly in this details page. So again, I didn't have to go to the start of the app. I didn't have to drill down. I went directly from a toast into a portion of the app. And that's one of the new deep linking in toast features that we have in Windows Phone Mango. So the other thing we can do is, of course, we can animate these tiles and update these tiles. So for the start, I'm going to leave the tile ID blank, because we're going to animate our default tile. Let's up the count to, say, 13. Let's make the front title be aliens again, aliens invade. We'll leave the front image the same. The back title we will set as Where's Will Smith? Actually, we'll put that as the content, Where's Will Smith? Everybody seen Independence Day? Where's Will Smith? And a back image we'll leave blank. So we will just see the accent color of the phone, which in this case is blue. So yeah, you see world news down here. It says world news, world news. It's not animating. and there's no count. Now, if everything works well, when I click this, oops, sorry, wrong one. We went to news headlines, the count went to 13, and the text here says aliens invade. Now, the tile isn't going to animate straight away because I've been sitting on the start menu for a while, but if I go into the app and then come back again, now it'll start animating. And it does that because it doesn't want to animate forever and waste battery doing these animations. But it will start animating. So there, see it flipped over. It says, where's Will Smith? If I had another image, there could be an image here. I could also set the title, which would have more text. And it'll flip back and forth a few times. And I can update the other tiles too. So for example, if I go back to Visual Studio, I should have a list of other tiles that are pinned. If I run this again, it will tell me what other tiles I have pinned, the world news and the local news. So let's take this. Let's go back to the start menu, go back to my demo application, and let's say that I want to update the world news one. And I use the URL of the page that it's linking to as the ID of the tile. So now I'm going to update world news. Let's make the count 50. Let's make the front title TechEd 2011. The back title can be Atlanta. And I don't know, it's hot as our content. And now when I send this one, it should update our world news tile if I got this parameter correct. So if I send the tile update, you now see that world news now says TechEd 2011. The update was 50. And if I go somewhere else and then come back again, we'll see them both start animating. We'll see Aliens Invade with Will Smith, and we'll see TechEd 2011 with It's Hot, I think. So wait a second, and now they both flip over. So now through the cloud, I can send these toasts to the device with content and linking directly into my application. And I can send these tile updates that let me target individual tiles, that let me deep link directly into places in the application, and that let me specify both the front of the tile and the back of the tile. Oh, question was, what detected I had the malformed URI and didn't show the message? I don't know the answer to that. It might have been, it was probably the client. Oh, okay, the comment was I was missing the equals. It could have been that. I think it was the slash though, but I'm not 100% sure. And so this, actually, if any of you went out there now, you could probably hit this URL and send toast to my device, but please avoid doing that and sending non-PG friendly messages. So let's have a look at what the code actually looks like on the service, because we've seen a look at what the client looks like on the device, right? The local tile update, the local toast update, pinning, etc. What does it look like on the service to actually send these things through the push notification service? So this is that application that's running in Azure. Very simple. It's a simple ASP.NET application. It has very basic HTML. As you saw, it was just a table with a bunch of text boxes in it, so there's no magic here. And in the ASPX page, we have basically the tile click handler, so when I click on send a tile, and I have toast click handler for when I click on the toast button, and then this shared method called send notification. And the only real difference between sending the tile and sending the toast is that the XML blob is a little bit different. So for sending a tile, we can send the background image, we can send the count, the title. They're the three that exist in Windows Phone 7. And then the new ones for Mango, we can specify back title, back content, background image. I'm also targeting a specific ID. That's how I get to each of the individual tiles. Then I format the message. I insert all the right values from the text boxes into that XML file, into that XML document. And then I call my helper function send notification with my subscription URI, which is the URI that the client sent to my service. The formatted XML, which is the XML with all the right parameters injected. And then a target of type token, which is just an enum I define that says I want to update the token versus the toast. A little bit of an aside, they're called start tiles now. Guess what they used to be called? Start tokens. And I send a priority of 1, which means send it as soon as you can. And then to send a toast, it's almost exactly the same. I have an XML document, which is a little bit smaller because toasts have fewer properties. I send text 1 and text 2 and the parameter, which is the page to link into. Format that message with the right parameters injected, and then call my same helper function, send notification, again with the subscription URI, the formatted XML, a target of type toast, and a priority of 2. And then the interesting stuff is what happens in send notification. And as I mentioned before, this is all standard web functionality. There's nothing special here, nothing secret. It's all just very basic HTTP post. So what I do is I create an HTTP web request, very familiar to anyone that's done pretty much any kind of networking in .NET. I set the method to post because I'm going to post up that XML document that we've just created. I can set a message ID if I want to. There's a custom message ID you can send. And what this does is it lets you know when the server responds, it'll say, I'm responding for this particular message. So if you've sent a whole bunch of messages and you want to keep track of them, you can specify your own unique ID, and then the server will let you know via the ID which one it's responding for. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my XML document with all the properties in it. I'm going to encode that into a byte array because I want to stream that out through my web request. I set the content length, obviously, to the length of the byte array I just created. I set my content type to text XML. I add a couple of custom headers. One is X Windows Phone target, and this is where I say either token or toast, so it knows whether it's going to send it to a toast or it's going to send it to a token. You can also do the raw notification if you want, but we're not doing that today. I also specify the class, so you can ask for essentially immediate delivery or delayed delivery if you don't really need it to be as soon as possible. Then I get the request stream from the web request, so I can write my XML document into it. So I write my XML document into the web request stream. Then I call getResponse, which is what triggers the posting of the data and getting a response back from the server. Then I look at some of the headers that come back, and I update my text box at the bottom of the screen, which just gives me the status of was the message received, is it being suppressed, and is the subscription active or not. And then if there's an exception, I just return a string. So that's all it takes to send data from your cloud service to a Windows Phone device via our push notification service. Right? You create 10 lines of XML, put in some text inside it, and then just do a post to our service. Right? Super simple. Nothing rocket sciencey about that at all. So at the start of the session, I mentioned that we got a bunch of feedback from developers, and we've tried to address that. So let's see what we did to address those things. First thing was, people said, give me more control of my tile. Right? I don't just want to rely on push, I want to do it locally, I want more features of my tile. So we gave you local tile APIs, which you've seen today. We gave you multiple tiles, which you've seen today, and we gave you the back of tile support. So this gives you more control over what your tile looks like, how often it updates, how you can update, and how many of them that you have. People also asked for richer notifications and interaction. So how do I get the deep linking? How do I get more than one tile? So we did that. We gave you multiple tiles, we gave you the back of tile, and we gave you deep links in Toast. And you've seen those three things today as well. People asked for more reliable notifications. And I talked a bit about how we now have a better polling interval and how we are more efficient and we can have more endpoints on the phone. That gives us the reliability, the efficiency, and the performance that we need to up that limit from 15 to 30 and to change the maximum delay from an hour to 15 minutes. Unfortunately, in the demo today, you didn't really see that because we're just working off an emulator, but these are improvements that will be coming in Windows Phone Mango. And people also asked for more endpoints per phone. The number we had before, as I mentioned, was actually good enough for most users, but power users needed more, so we upped that to 30. So we've done that too. And then lastly, people ask for more cloud samples because getting started with push notifications can be difficult. And so in the keynote, the Azure folks have given a toolkit for Windows Phone. I showed you how to do it with Azure, and this code will be up on my blog once the tools ship towards the end of the month. So we are building out more samples. There's more documentation on MSDN on how to do this. And hopefully, as you saw today, it's really, really simple to send a push notification. Right? Take some XML, post it to a web server. It's really simple. But if we can make it simpler, then please let us know. So we've added those Azure recipes. We've added the Azure toolkit. We've rewritten the MSDN docs, and we're trying to get more samples out to you. So the call to action for this session, firstly, is notice some of the inspiring ideas that are out there. So I mentioned the weather. I mentioned AlphaJax. I mentioned the Bees Twitter app. There are a bunch of apps out there that already use live tiles and already use toasts. If you're the developer of one of them, thank you for doing that. If you're not, think about how you can use these features in your app to help stand out and to help raise above the competition in the marketplace. These features do open up even more unique functionality on the phone. I mentioned at the start, we're not the only phone with a push notification, but we are the only phone with these live tiles and this dynamic start experience. So using these new features takes us even further with backup tile and with multi-tile support. We don't believe that building a push service is particularly hard, but if it is, please let us know. We keep lowering the barriers to make it easier and easier with these samples that we're putting out and the toolkit that we're putting out, but please let us know if it could be easier. And thank you to everyone here building cool apps, whether you already have a push app or whether you're about to run out of the door and write a push app. Thank you for doing that. We really do appreciate that. And one of the things I've been saying is really stand out. If you have a push-enabled app and you use live tiles, you do stand out from the rest of the crowd. So that's one way to really get your application to shift above, maybe have some competition in the marketplace. It's a way to get above them to say, my app has tiles, my app has notifications, my app has toasts, it's more engaging, it's more delightful to the user, it's a better application than that other guys or girls. So that's the end of the main talk. I did mention at the start you could win a Windows Phone 7 if you stuck around and you paid attention. So let me go ahead and find that deck that I have, which will give you a secret question. So, a couple of rules for this particular contest. The first one is, I'm going to ask a question. I want you to raise your hand if you know the answer. Don't shout it out. People often want to just blurt out the answer, but that doesn't work because I can't tell who was first, and then everyone knows the answer, so it doesn't, we can't pick the next person. So raise your hand, don't shout out. The second one is, unfortunately, if you're a government employee or you're a Microsoft employee, you're not eligible. I apologize for that. It's just the rules we work with. So that said, everyone ready with your hands. The question is, what's the new maximum polling delay in Windows Phone Mango? A gentleman there you. Correct answer, 15 minutes, yes. So if you come up at the end of the talk, I will take your details and you have won yourself a brand new Windows Phone 7. Congratulations. So that's it. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you all for coming and enjoy the rest of your time at TechEd.